Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another brand new episode of Misdiscovered Movies. I'm your host Dylan Cardoni, taking you on an incredible journey into the history of the movies, where we actually talk about, of course, some of the most forgotten and yet overlooked films of all time. So please, join me on these incredible adventures, and let's celebrate film in the most extraordinary way together. In today's episode, we will time travel back to the year of 1967 with a film that is actually considered by many as one of the most underrated musicals of the 20th century. This is Doctor Dolittle. Now, for those of you that are not actually familiar with the original story of Doctor Dolittle, then you are almost certainly not alone. It actually tells the incredible tale and life of Dr. John Dolittle, a veterinarian who lives in the outskirts of England during the Victorian era. What the villagers and actually some of the people during that era actually do know is that Dr. Dolittle actually has one of the most amazing gifts ever, and that is he can actually communicate with animals, all types of animals, zebras, giraffes, lions, tigers, bears, and anything else that you can think of. When he's accused of letting a helpless seal out from captivity, he was eventually sent to an asylum, but actually plans to escape with the help of his closest friends and actually journeys across the Pacific Ocean to search for the great pink sea snail, a legendary creature who Dr. Dolittle has been searching for many years prior to being a veterinarian. Now, when you think of a movie like Dr. Dolittle in modern times, people will always think of the remake version of Dr. Dolittle with Eddie Murphy in mind in people's imagination, since that's actually one of the films that he is most identified today. But what many people do not know is that there has actually been a movie version of the character that dates all the way back during the early stages of the 1960s, as I just mentioned. Now, I'm actually going to be brutally honest with all of you, since of course this is actually one of the reasons why I'm actually talking about this. When I actually first heard this film, I wasn't actually too familiar with the original movie version of Dr. Dolittle, only except that my mother had mentioned this to me several times during my childhood. I remember watching this version, and I completely said to myself that the film is actually very similar to several other mammoth musicals that I have eventually seen before. I completely enjoyed the film at the first time I watched it, and I actually thought that Rex Harrison, who actually played the role of Dr. Dolittle, had actually done an incredible job. Arthur P. Jacobs, who actually produced the original movie version of Dr. Dolittle, was not actually a highly well-known producer at the time. He already made, of course, only one feature film to his credit before the release of Dr. Dolittle, entitled What a Way to Go, that was actually released over a few years earlier in 1964. That film, of course, actually became a major box office success, which actually led him to actually produce more movies at the studio of 20th Century Fox. At the same time, Jacobs had already purchased the rights to Hugh Loftington's children's novel of the character and had wanted to make the film immediately after What a Way to Go. But after seeing, of course, the box office successes of both Mary Poppins from Walt Disney Studios and, of course, The Sound of Music, 20th Century Fox, of course, were actually very hungry for more big splashy movie musicals. Rex Harrison, who actually shines as Dr. Dolittle, was a very successful actor in both film and on Broadway. He eventually won an Oscar for his portrayal of Professor Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady, which may be considered one of his most iconic performances of all time. Jacobs had always thought of Harrison in mind for the role of Dr. Dolittle, and very much, of course, offered the role to him personally. But in order for Harrison to actually take on the role of Dr. Dolittle, he also hired one of his longtime friends, Alan J. Lerner, to actually write the songs for the film after when the Sherman Brothers had turned down the opportunity. Production on the film, of course, was actually a very difficult one to make, since most of it was actually delayed due to very high costs filming in certain parts of England. But as time went on, Alan J. Lerner was actually fired before shooting began, and Harrison also departed the project for a short time. Jacobs, who was still reluctant to make the film, decided to hire Canadian actor Christopher Plummer in the lead role instead. Plummer was not actually a professional singer, and his voice in The Sound of Music was eventually dubbed by someone who actually had more talent than he did. I guess if you want to find someone to actually fit the part, then perhaps he should have gone with a person that actually has incredible singing abilities. When it was decided that Leslie Bricusse was actually going to write the music for the film, Harrison was completely excited about this and had wanted to be brought back onto the project. Plummer, on the other hand, had actually wanted a full salary even before production began. I mean, I can't think of anyone who can play Dr. Dolittle than Rex Harrison. However, Harrison will only do it unless he actually has some creative control during the production of the film. The movie, of course, actually had a lot of technical difficulties from the start of shooting, and most of the animals that Harrison had to work with were very difficult to cooperate on camera. Some of the animals, of course, actually spat on Harrison, and actually even kicked some of the crew members in between takes, which became a total wreck on the film. It is in fact, of course, a fun, weird, and delightful children's musical full of laughter and adventure. I was actually kind of shocked to find out that people didn't really enjoy this film, and I couldn't understand why the newer generation cannot actually talk about this family feature. Unfortunately, however, the film became a box office failure when it was released in 1967. If there is anything as to why this film is actually misdiscovered, it's because 1967 was a change year for Hollywood. The Hays Code production was actually already being demolished, where the new Hollywood film movement was about to come into play. People wanted to see more serious films than the random traditional movie musical that most people were used to seeing while going to the theater. That's why the film actually became a forgotten lost misdiscovered movie. Movie musicals, of course, were already shying away from the spotlight to bring in more filmmakers during that era and had wanted to see the big ticket item films that everyone would enjoy seeing. Although the original movie version of Dr. Dolittle did receive a bit of a cult following after the years had passed, and it was actually nominated for 9 Oscars including Best Picture, which eventually won 2 for Best Visual Effects and Best Original Song for Talk to the Animals, it did however turn into a 1998 successful Broadway musical, as well as many different adaptations with Eddie Murphy in mind for the role, and a 2020 feature starring Robert Downey Jr. in the title role. If anything really, I will always choose Rex Harrison as the essential Dr. Dolittle of all time. Now it's up to you, ladies and gentlemen, on what you think this movie might be. Do you think that this version of Dr. Dolittle from 1967 is actually a misdiscovered film that should be rediscovered for future generations? Or do you think that the original movie version of Dr. Dolittle is indeed a misunderstood film? Until next time, I will see you at the movies.